Well, good morning, everyone, including you who are joined us on Zoom. You may be surprised to see someone else sitting in the chair. I'll explain that in a moment. You may also be surprised if you read the website calendar that we are having an open forum today rather than a talk. But it is a fortuitous mistake on my part that we ended up with an open forum today because I have the opportunity for my beloved son to be our facilitator. Now, my beloved son is named Benjamin, but he's also goes by the name Bimal, B-I-M-A-L, Bimal. He was given that name in 1974 by Swami Prabhavananda. Swami Prabhavananda accepted him as a disciple in 1973, and Bimal has studied with the Swamis more or less continuously since 1973. In terms of facilitation of this workshop, this open forum on Jnana Yoga, Bimal is sufficiently esteemed by the nuns of the Santa Barbara Convent and Temple in Southern California that he has been asked to do this kind of workshop for them on several occasions. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce my son, Bimal, and our open forum on Jnana Yoga. I'll make just two announcements. First of all, the temple is open, this chapel, is open every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for your use. It would be a kindness if you sit apart from anyone else, if there is someone else in the chapel when you arrive, but that's the only request that we make. Otherwise, some of you may already know, but if you don't, you may be happy to know that starting July 7th through the 10th, July 7th through 10th, we'll have Swami Sarvapriyananda with us here. He will do a 2-day retreat, spiritual retreat. His subject is the Ashtavakra Gita, the Ashtavakra Samhita, and he will speak on that on the 8th and 9th, those 2 days, 2-day retreat on the Ashtavakra Samhita. The more details will be provided as we go along, but that is what is taking place. So thank you very much.
Can you kick us off with a chant?
Oh yes, thank you for reminding me, son. Om Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahano Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvina Aditamastu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, may the divine being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks for the reminder, son. And so we begin. May all of you be well and in bright spirits, and now you're in Bimal's capable hands.
Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you there online and to see you here in the temple. I am new to this format, so please be patient with me if I need a little assistance. Um, so today we are talking about Jnana Yoga, and I'm going to read from the worksheet and then talk through some of these definitions, and then we'll have an opportunity for all of us to ask questions, make comments, talk about what's important to us about these teachings. Okay. May is a month for study of Jnana Yoga, Advaita Vedanta. As a Jnana yogi, you practice discrimination, reason, detachment, satyagraha, insistence on truth. You seek total freedom from conditions and limitations and union with Brahman. Our teachers say that all your misery and your lonely sense of separation are caused by seeing inaccurately. As an earnest and persistent jnani, you may break through this misapprehension, Maya. All that was hidden is revealed, and you see the divine presence everywhere, in everything and everyone. Before I move into the definitions of this, this really is the essence of Vedanta, what we've just read. I mean, you could really just read these two paragraphs and meditate, and you'd be able to be done, you know. That doesn't mean that there aren't other paths that you could take, and they're just as worthy. But the essence of Vedanta is really laid out right here. And that's what has always attracted me to Jnana Yoga. Myself, I think best that would be described is that I'm a Jnana yogi with karma yogi tendencies, because I do benefit from selfless service when I can manage it. I don't claim to be without ego, but there are times that I get close. So, so you know, it's funny. My father spoke about how I have done this in the past. The other times that I've done this in the past, I have actually done magic along with it. I am a magician. I don't spend a whole lot of time doing magic these days, but one of the things that is beautiful about magic, and this analogy, is that, you know, magic is illusion, and Jnana Yoga is all about determining what is illusory and what is not, right? That discrimination. So, so I'll probably refer to that a few times as we go along today. So Jnana Yoga, you know, we defined it up front, but I like to think of it as the path of knowledge. I like to think of it as the path of truth. One of the things that really appealed to me, because I mean, you know, Dad talks about how I was here in 1973, or in Hollywood in 1973 with Swami P. I was, but of course I was 9, right? You know, in 1973, and learning all of this, you know, one thing that's good about it, I think, was I was raised in it, and so it was gospel to me. I don't know a whole lot about Christianity, to be honest with you. I know more about Vedanta because I was raised in it. And one of the things that appealed to me was the notion that we could have dualism because it was convenient, because it was helpful, perhaps, to think of God as someone to be implored, but that at the very, very heart of it, it was just a convenience. Dualism was just a convenience, and that non-dualism, which is at the heart of jnana, is the truth, right? And that appealed to me a lot as a boy. I'm not, you know, I have a philosophical bent. I was a philosophy major in college, you know, but that appealed to me, that there was a path that you could take that would help get you there, but in the end, there was nothing that wasn't God. You know, and I love a phrase that you hear in recovery a lot. There is no part of me that is not a part of God, right? And so when I think of Jnana Yoga, I think of that. I think of just that all of this, and we'll talk more about Maya and things, in a minute, but all of this is here, but all of it is unimportant, because what is really true is that I'm nothing but a piece of God, right? So discrimination, how do we start to parse that out? How do we get together with this? One of the chants that Swami Prabhupada used to use all the time opens with "Lead us from the unreal to the real," and that idea of discrimination, that idea that I am not my thoughts, I am not this outfit, I am not my feelings, I am not whether or not I get the biggest piece of cake, is true, but how do I discriminate that? It's funny because when I got to philosophy in college, one of the things I learned about was idealism. In the school of empiricism, which is kind of funny, there's a branch of that called idealism, and it was led, not oddly enough, by a bishop, Bishop Berkeley, an Irish bishop, and his notion was that we are nothing but pieces of the imagination of God, which just completely reminded me of the story of the divine play, right? And Shiva, hiding bits of himself all throughout the universe, only to have them find their way back, and that I thought, oh, this guy actually got it right. This, and of course, I was completely nuts as far as the other people in my philosophy classes were concerned, because most of them didn't believe in God at all. And Bishop Berkeley was just a sort of odd, anachronistic, weird thing, right? Who also had some thoughts about perception, right? And those thoughts about perception really are thoughts very similar to Vedanta, which is that everything is just something perceived by a mind, right? That there are no objects apart from those being perceived by a mind, whether that is by the mind of God or by the mind of us, and we are Atman, we are nothing but God anyway, right? And so, discrimination is awfully important to us because we must, if we are going to be jnanis, we have to be paying attention to, is this important? Is this, I must engage in this, I must engage with this world, I must make a living, I'm a householder, but is this important? And one of the tools that we can use for discrimination is reason. Reason, is about the mind, not about the emotion. That is the classic definition of reason, at least in the English terms, and there is room for emotion. There is bhakti, there is room for absolute devotion to God. We can have that path. That path can be extremely important to us, and the ritual and the almost, and I say this not in a bad way, but in almost the subjugation of ourselves to God, right? I am prostrate. I am only here for you. That path exists, and it is a worthy path. But it is a different path. It isn't jnana. And so how do I use reason to help me here? How do I use reason to help me discriminate? I think and you have to pardon me, this was mentioned to me yesterday. Do you want to do this? And so none of this is rehearsed. It's all just off the cuff. So if I sound crazy, that's why. But how do I use that reason? How do I use the mind? Well, it really comes back to, I like to think of that notion that there is no part of me that is not a part of God as a compass, and that compass is always pointing north. It's always true, right? And so, and that God is what is important and Maya is what is transitory is also always true. And so by leaning on that truth, by leaning on those ideas, I can discriminate what is important, and that is not to say that things of the heart are not important, and I discriminate when I say that even in terms of bhakti. I'm thinking more about the love that we have for people. Most of us in this room are householders. Most of us are loving other people. And not to say that even sadhus don't love other people, but I mean, but it's a different type of place in our life, right? And that can really be done within a jnani space as well. It is not exclusionary. I really got confused about that as a boy. That if I was a jnani, that meant I had to be a monk. I was sort of terrified of that as a child growing up. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to be a monk because this is the only truth. And why would you engage with anything if this was the only truth? It was somewhat, and I'm not bent to being a monk. That isn't my way. My wife is right there, and I'm very grateful for her. But we do have space in jnana for that love. One of the things that really, the truths that Swami P shared with us was that love is really about seeing God, right? When we see others, we are seeing the face of God. And when we love others, we are loving God, and God has room for all of what is in a marriage and in a friendship, and so that helped settle me, that I didn't have to be a monk if I wanted to follow this path, right? And so detachment, we do live our lives. We engage with things. Swami Vivekananda enjoyed a cigarette. We offer cigarettes to Swami Vivekananda on his puja, right? But so to actually experience a sense pleasure in itself is not a problem. To be attached to a sense pleasure is a big problem. Right? That attachment is the issue. I think, and then I was joking earlier about, I am not having the biggest piece of cake, right? That there's something one of the ways I practice is detachment, and it sounds sort of odd, is to try to give what I would like to have to somebody else. I still get some, right? Generally, but what I would like to have, I give to somebody else. Because that, and the essence of that is that you're just fine afterwards, right? You find out that you wanted that, and you want, I keep coming back to the biggest piece of cake because I'm just a little glutton, right? But you wanted that, but when you had the smaller piece, you were fine. There was no loss. There was nothing, and that I like little crystal examples like that because they can help us take truth and put it into small enough pieces that I can understand it, right? And so, if I give up what I want in the moment, even if it's not about a thing, right? If I wanted to do this, but I must do that, right? It isn't important. It is my ego that tells me that I have to have that, right? It is it is the part of me that wants to think I am the self. I am this thing. I am, right? I love George Harrison, even those tears, I me mine, right? And so, I am not what I want, other than perhaps wanting God, right? So detachment is so important to us. And again, it isn't that I will never engage with the world. It isn't that I will never engage even in a sense pleasure, but it is, what does it mean to me? And what am I willing to give up to get it, right? And then satyagraha, I don't know if I'm saying that properly. Thank you for the nod. Okay, good. Yeah, we've got someone who I think actually knows on the screen nodding with me there. Thank you. Insistence on truth. I looked this up because it wasn't a term that I was really familiar with. And I looked it up, and one of the things that this is about is what Gandhi used. There's 3 elements to this, and I can't talk about it, but with any education, because I just looked it up this morning. But this was his method, and his method for resistance and for nonviolence. It's all rooted in Jnana Yoga, which I didn't know. I knew it was rooted in our thinking, but in what we learned, but I didn't know that. And so, at least in terms of Gandhi, it is that insistence on the truth, that is insistence on and doing no harm, which I think is important. I have done great harm. I have hurt people. I have lied. I have been selfish, throughout my life. I try not to be as bad today as I have been in the past. It's an effort, but we do, harm, and whenever I experience some harm to me, I don't think of karma as tit for tat. I don't think karma is like, you do this and then it's going to happen right back, right? But it's more like what you experience is what you are capable of, and to remind myself, I am capable of doing this harm, and I must pay attention, to that. How are we doing on time? Okay, freedom from limitation. This is really, if I manage to discriminate, if I manage to live in detachment, then I can get glimpses of freedom from limitation. And I say glimpses because I'm still long way from nirvikalpa samadhi. But the idea is that, if I practice these tenets, then I will experience moksha. I will have the freedom from limitation. And and in those glimpses, because luckily when we do this, and sometimes it's not just in meditation, sometimes it's in the middle of karma yoga, sometimes it's in the middle of some other piece of service where you just, it's almost like the veil got lifted for just a second and you see what is real and what is important, and it's hard to hold on to. It's ineffable, right? But it is there. And it keeps us going. And I know it keeps me going, because this is so heady, and I'm a heady person to begin with. I don't really mind being, being intellectual, but I can, pivot myself into the corner, right? I can paint myself into the corner if I'm not careful with my intellectualism, and have the ego itself, right? So if I practice this consistently, I do get those glimpses of freedom of limitation, freedom from limitation, and I will. And as I age, and I'm going to be 59 here in a hot minute, they come more often, and they start. Another way they show up is seeing choices that you didn't see before, experiencing the world differently. In my experience, anyway, experiencing the world differently. Seeing an opportunity rather than go down this path to go down that path, because that would be, for lack of a better word, more in line with what is true. Right? I always think about, one of the beautiful things about Vedanta is that it really isn't really good or bad. There's just towards truth and further from truth. I always think of it as like a railroad track, and I can be moving towards the truth and I can be moving away from the truth, but I'm not on a different track. I'm not in a different place. It's all God, right? Shiva is the creation and the destruction. It's all God, right? And so, but these glimpses from limitation keep us going, I think. And then, of course, so much of what we've talked about already is Maya. The world presents itself to us, both in terms of what we think is important and what we think, in terms of the sense experiences, and, just the world in general, engaging, and it isn't real. What the heck? What do you mean it isn't real? Here I sit, right? That leap of faith is the essence of our work, right? But it is, as I said a minute ago, those glimpses of freedom from limitation that can give us the steam to keep going on that, right? And to say, yes, that is what is real. That is what is important. That is true. And I will let this go. I will not grip so tightly in all of this. And then divine presence. Divine presence, as I said in the beginning, there is no part of me that is not a part of God. There is nothing but God. And I've touched on it so often when I talk about that veil being lifted for just a moment. That is a sense of the divine presence, of seeing that there is nothing but God. And in being in love with your beloved, seeing God, spending time, holy company can be so helpful, to spend time with others, and with monastics who are really focusing on this. It's funny because I'm intellectual and I'm a philosophy major and all of that, but I don't think that much about trying to understand all of this. It's just true. How do I know it's true? I know it's true from those glimpses, and I know it's true because some of the people who I spend time with, Prabhupada, Swahananda, Shraddhananda, who was in Sacramento when I was a boy, who was also named Bimal, which is very important to me. You know, all of the swamis that I've experienced, Sarvadevananda now, you know, these are people who are living in this truth all the time, and they are not going to steer me wrong, right? And that may be sort of depending on sort of outward things, but you know what? I believe it. So I don't have to fuss with much back and forth about it. I just believe it, you know, and that's helpful. So let's close with these quotes. Everything yields to earnestness. Everything yields to earnestness, you know. You know, it's funny, earnestness almost has a bad connotation in the United States. You know, like somehow being earnest is being overly pious or above it all or something like that. But really, to be earnest is to just be in the truth. To be earnest and to recognize one's place, you know, in that I am not the most important thing, right? At least that's what this means to me. And then your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world. I'm in recovery. I'm in AA. I've been sober for most of my adult life. And we say, we have an expression in AA, which is that we are a program of attraction rather than promotion, right? Meaning that we are examples of what it is like, rather than going out and saying, you know, let me tell you what it's, you know, let me tell you, you change, you know, but more like we are an example of what it is to be in line with some kind of higher power, you know, because that's in the essence. And it's funny because AA was just Vedanta creeping up behind me, you know. If you look at the 12 steps, it is very, very, very Vedantic, you know. And so, you know, but when you think about that, the thing that makes us most attractive to others, and I mean attractive in terms of like, who is that? You know, what's going on with that person? Is that alignment with truth, that alignment with a higher power, alignment with Atman, with Brahman, you know. So so as I said, you know, this is my path with leanings of you know, I certainly do some meditation, and I certainly do, you know, more karma yoga than anything else in terms of action in the world. But this is at the heart of how I try to live. And I get it right a little bit. And I'm grateful. So I would love to, you know, it's just 11:34, so let's open it up to others' thoughts and questions, and but mostly I'd love your own commentary on this and how it's important to you, but certainly questions as well, as if you want to ask anything. So do I have to do anything to unmic the mic people, or
I think it should be able to.
They should be able to unmute themselves?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So please, who would like to make a comment or begin?
Benjamin, this is Haima.
Hello, Haima.
I'm from Denver. I'm in Denver. I'm the Lone Ranger on the Zoom today.
Great.
Sorry to miss all the holy company, but I'm in the holy space. I know I'm in the holy space with all of you. And it's a wonderful privilege to meet you and knowing your wisdom and your journey through forgiveness and all this love towards God. And it's wonderful. My take on actually about Jnana Yoga, mastering the crowning virtue of forgiveness by learning to forgive ourselves is one of the most important one, like also self-love and sacrifice.
Yeah.
So those are the important things from Jnana Yoga. Renunciation, of course, is the major piece of it. and finding my own divinity through knowledge is Jnana Yoga for me.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you so much for the time. And it's great to see you. And we love Brother Shankara. And
Yes.
similarly, we are going to love you. Thank you. I'll give the floor to everyone else.
I love what you said about forgiveness and forgiving oneself.
Yes,
It is so
very important.
important, and really, I talked about AA being the back door. You know, when you actually make amends with people, and you take responsibility for yourself, because making amends with people is really about taking responsibility for your own actions. Where I was talking about, you'll know a new freedom and a new happiness. And really, I think for the first time, I was able to get to a level of self-forgiveness by doing that. And so whether or not you've got any issues with drinking or drugs or anything like that, that notion of taking responsibility for yourself in your own relationships can yield so much in terms of spiritual practice. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
If I talk, can the people out there in computer land hear me?
Can you hear him? Yes, then they're nodding and they're saying they can.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, good. So anyway, yeah, I appreciated your talk. And while you were talking, I just started to hear bits and pieces of songs from the psychedelic 60s.
Huh.
And, that relate to something happened then, and there was a lot of, spirituality in the music. And
Yeah.
this bird song, I may not have the lyrics exactly right, but it was something like, I will keep falling as long as I live, and without ending, and never hit bottom, and keep falling through,
Right.
just relaxed and paying attention. And that's what it feels like to me. It's like there's this letting go, this feeling that I need to hold on or something terrible will happen.
Yeah.
I have to hold on or I'll fall and I'll hit.
Yeah.
But I let go and nothing terrible happens.
Yeah.
It's like there's nothing to hold on to, but also there's nothing to hit.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
it's all good. And in a Beatles song, Strawberry Fields,
Yeah.
let me take you down where I'm going to. Strawberry Fields Forever, nothing now I can't get the lyrics.
Strawberry fields, nothing is real, but nothing
Exactly.
to get hung about.
Yeah,
Right.
Strawberry Fields, nothing is real and nothing to get hung about.
Right.
That's the way it feels.
Right.
So yeah, that was amazing, an amazing time when all of those songwriters, through the use of psychedelics, which have long-term ill effects, but it worked for them to write that music at that time. And it was really wonderful. But I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you were really into Vedanta when you were really young, because you were thinking about the possibility of being a monk.
Yeah.
And you're really into Vedanta now.
Yeah. Was
there any time in between when you rejected the whole thing and came back to it, or was it always?
No, I never rejected the whole thing. I certainly rejected a lot of spiritual practice for periods of my life. But I never rejected the whole thing. I mean, I do believe what helped me get sober was sitting in that horrible apartment, and I was about 20, right? And my experiences with Swami Prabhupada and his grace of essentially lifting that veil a little bit for me, as a child. So I knew what was real, and I knew what could be, and that things could be better. So luckily the truth went with me the whole time, but there definitely were periods when I was younger when I did less actual practice of it. Yeah.
And I'm also in AA. Been 35 years since I've had a drink.
Yeah.
And it was really good for me. I was doing a lot of meditation while I was drinking heavily.
Yeah.
AA humbled me. You know, it's like I had to admit that I really screwed up. My life was a mess. I had to ask people for help. And it felt terrible at the time. You know, I'm a bad drunk. I can't quit drinking. I need to go in AA. What a terrible disaster. But it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because I could let go once again and ask for help, be humbled, drop some. My arrogance continues to come back. Leaves me and comes back, leaves me and come back. But for a moment there, I dropped my arrogance, you know, went into AA, picked up a white chip and felt good.
Yeah.
It felt like putting down a heavy burden and walking through the pearly gates into heaven.
Yeah.
The last time I picked up a white chip, I was in and out for 7 years, so I had quite a few relapses. But,
Yeah.
That's my story in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm loving that I'm getting these nuggets. I got the forgiveness nugget. And now you said something. I've always used that analogy of jumping off the cliff and being willing to know that I won't fall. But you said something that I've never heard before, which is that there's nothing to hit, you know,
Yeah.
and I love that. And not only do I not have to worry about falling, there is nothing to hit. And that I will take with me. So thank you so much. That's really great.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Others, please, here or on Zoom.
Hi, this is Gaurav. I didn't really get your name because I kind of joined 5 minutes after the session started. I'm sorry, and I didn't get a link either.
Bimal.
What is it?
Bimal. Bimal. Bimal.
Oh, Bimal. Okay, I'm from Bengal, so I know what Bimal. Okay.
Yes. You know some Bimals, right?
Oh, yes. One of my uncle's name is Bimal too, so I know. Yes, absolutely. So the thing is, yes, it's a very enlightening conversation we're having, and I almost feel like the more you meditate, means I'm not a Jnani yogi. I'm more into Raja Yoga. I meditate to Mother all the time, and more you do that, you tend to have an objective view of the world. Means you are not the doer. You start realizing that you are pretty much in the waves of Maya. You're just a leaf and you're floating along. Whatever she does, you do. And one of the things I feel is until you start experiencing it, like Swami Vivekananda said, don't believe it. So don't believe anything anybody says. Experience it first, and I kind of fall in that category. So yeah, so I think that's what it is. And the other thing about Gandhi, like I know we tend to, from Indian perspective, this is from a guy who's in Bengal, who was born and raised there. We try to associate him with something spiritual, but he was a politician. So I want to keep it.
Sure.
Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got it. Anybody else? Got plenty of time here.
Well, I'll just chip in something, son. Something you said earlier about, you know, it all being illusory. This was definitely affirmed by Sri Ramakrishna. He said that even Shakti, even Kali, if looked at analytically, if looked at carefully, you see that she too, Shakti too, is a dream. It is without substance.
Yeah.
And yet it is within time, space, and causation, within Maya. And as long as we, as he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, as long as we have this sense of being an I, of being an individual, as long as that has not disappeared, which only disappears in the depths of samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, that's the only place it really disappears. As long as we have that, then we have to recognize that the other is operation. It is what is happening. And as Gaurav said, so we see that we are not the doer, that something else is the doer, and we are somehow being the instrument for that doing. That's
Indeed.
my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, good.
I would actually like to ask
Thank you, brother.
well, yes, a question to follow what Brother Shankar said.
Yeah.
He said that we only time we lose the eye consciousness is in samadhi. Is it possible that this is also true in deep sleep? The sense of eye consciousness.
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. Because when I'm in deep sleep, I haven't studied it, and so there may be some study that is there. And I am, the only way I know about deep sleep is to look at my app that says I was in it for some period of time, you know, and I'm glad I was. But other than that, I don't know.
The answer from the yogi's perspective is yes. That the sense of eye consciousness disappears in deep sleep. But the only difference being in that and in samadhi, though we don't understand the distinction is that in samadhi, we are aware that we are still aware. Whereas in deep sleep, we are no longer aware that we are aware.
Right.
Though the fact that the brain waves persist indicate that indeed we are somehow aware. We're just not aware of that awareness.
Right.
So that's the answer from the yogic perspective. And it was one communicated by Swami Prabhupada.
You know, I've found that you can be conscious, but if there's nothing to be aware of, you're not aware of the consciousness. Until something comes along for you to realize that you're conscious.
Well, you have unusual experiences, Father Randa. You have unusual experiences of being where there's nothing in your consciousness. These are intimations, as Wordsworth put it. These are intimations of immortality. When they become continuous, then that's when the ego totally disappears. That's what we're doing. I should have done. You won't.
Oh, no, it's your temple. I have no hold on it. And you're a much better scholar than I am. I have never been a scholar by nature. I'll force myself into it for the purposes of it, but I am not a scholar by nature.
I'm also a lot older.
Yes. Other thoughts, other questions?
I think there was someone on the computer who had a question before I spoke up. I don't know if it's still.
I don't see any hands up, but if you want to speak, just unmute yourself and please speak.
Well, I'll say something if there's nobody
Sure.
else on the computer that wants to talk. So I think that when we talk about this stuff, language really breaks down. You know, we say, nothing is real or only this is real. But a dream is a real dream. A hallucination is a real hallucination. So what exactly do we mean when we use real? Some people have said, well, the only thing that's real is the unchanging. Well, that's that's one definition of real, but generally people use the word real in a lot of different ways. Also, we say, and it's true, that there really is no individual separate self, but just try talking without using the word I. You know, you just can't do it, or you can do it, but it's extremely awkward, and then you run into other things. So it seems to me that the whole purpose of language in these type of discussions, talking about Jnana Yoga, the whole purpose of language is to free you from language, free you from, various intellectual, conceptual frameworks and structures that I have. Won't talk about you, won't talk about me. The purpose of language for me in this type of spirituality is to free me from intellectual, I can take off my mask and people can hear me. The purpose of language is just to free me from language. But if I take the language, even the language of spirituality and Jnana yoga, if I take that too seriously, I just get trapped in some other set of concepts and so on.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I resonate with that. I think that for me, all language when it comes to God is analogies and metaphors. There isn't any, we are talking about something that cannot be described. We are limiting something that cannot be limited by the nature of language. And I try to remember that, I try to remember that when, I said, I don't try too hard to understand. Sometimes I just do. And one of the reasons for that is that if I could describe God, it wouldn't be God, right? If I could understand God, it wouldn't be God. It doesn't mean that it's fruitless to spend time thinking about it and trying within these limited ways to be able to parse it out. But I'll never describe it because it cannot be described. It is, and it is without feature in a way that we think of feature. And so that helps me actually, because I don't have to worry about getting the description just right, because I know that I will never be able to I will never get the description just right. But if I manage to be selfless, if I manage to meditate for fleeting moments, if I manage to align with the truth for any period of milliseconds, I will feel it. And that is so important, because a lot of folks who deny the existence of God say that there is no experience, you cannot experience God, therefore then it can't be real, right? And my experience has been quite the opposite. I have experienced God for just who knows how short a period of time, right? But over the years, that has been real. And so you can't tell me it's not real, because I've been there, right? And that really helps me. But I also know that I could never contain it well enough with language to be able to describe it.
And
Bimal,
Yes.
Gaurav here.
Yes, Gaurav, go ahead.
Gaurav here. So you kind of exactly reiterated what Swami Vivekananda keeps saying. Experience it and then believe it. Don't
Yes.
believe anything else. Otherwise, it means,
Right.
I think, yeah, it just gives chills down my spine when I think about it. Yes, and
Yeah.
it happens.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, until you experience, it cannot be put into words. Means any language is too inferior to do that. Means I don't know.
And when I appreciate what Swami Vivekananda said, what Swamiji said about, don't believe it if you haven't experienced it. I think as a child, I was given the gift of some of that experience without having to really earn it, or maybe I'd earned it in some karmic way before I got here as, this guy, but, so I think we can be gifted that by some other, sadhus, a pretty rare thing, but nevertheless, but I also know though that if I insist on the experience before, I could get trapped. by insisting on the experience before I believed. So I have to be careful with that, because I can, like I said, I can paint myself into a corner intellectually. And so I don't disagree with what Swamiji said at all, but I also know that I can be on a quest to experience more and not have to disbelieve what I haven't experienced yet, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. And one of the weirdest thing, Bimal, I'm talking to you right now. My parents were initiated in Sharada mission, which is the order of the,
Yes,
I believe
mother.
the nuns. Yes,
Yes.
mother. So, and I was exposed to this from like 8 years or 7 years old. And I couldn't explain some things, but gradually I'm gravitating towards mother completely. Means I don't know. I can't explain that.
Well, there's an awful big gravitational pull there, goodness knows. So, yeah.
You know, what you said, son, about being given when you were young. Well, it happened to both of us. I was, in my 31st year, you were in your 9th year when you came. But Swami Prabhupada said to us in so many words, I can give it to you like a fruit in the palm of my hand. Here, take. And so he did. And he gave it to us. And one of the ways he did that was giving us that three-fingered blessing that he gave. And that opened something up in us. Who knows how to apply? Well, as you say, there's no accounting for it. It isn't a meritocracy. We didn't earn it. It was simply a gift. But Swamiji gave it away with both hands, over and over and over.
Yeah.
People wrote about their experiences with Swamiji. And there's a wonderful recording that you could find on YouTube of a woman who Swami Vivekananda as a child, sitting on his knee and having the most amazing experience for no reason whatsoever. He just gave it to him.
Right.
Just being in his presence gave it to him.
Right.
So these great ones, and if for those of you who were here last weekend, Swami Sarvadevananda was here, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. For those of you who were in his presence, you felt something extraordinary from this man.
Yeah.
He has grown to become the face of the eternal teacher. And so it just flows from him like water from a mountain brook.
Mm-hmm.
And he just shares that joy. And there's no effort to it. It is as spontaneous as I say, as the pure water running down the mountain brook.
Yeah.
And it is the joy to behold.
Indeed.
And this is what is meant by the holiest of holy company.
Yeah.
All of us are holy company. All of us who are some way or another on this path are holy company. No two ways about it. But there are degrees of that, just like there are degrees of anything else. And we experienced it, as you mentioned, with Swami Prabhupada, Swami Swahananda, and that magical Swami Shraddhananda. Anyone who wants to know some wonderful stories, sometime ask me about Swami Shraddhananda. What inexpressible. And if you want to read a wonderful book, read his book, Seeing God Everywhere.
Yeah.
So simply, straightforwardly written, and exactly what the title says. It's written by someone whose vision had opened up to where he really and truly saw God everywhere, in everything, and everyone.
He didn't walk. He floated. I mean, I'm really grateful actually that I saw a lot of these people just as a little boy, right? Because I didn't have any sense of artifice. I didn't have any sense of what being properly this or properly that was, right? What priests were supposed to act like, or swamis or anything. Shraddhananda would come and visit at the Hollywood Center for periods of time in the summer. He would come down, and we had a lot of those incredible ones coming to at that time to visit, and he would come, and there was not the essence of sweetness, just the essence of just pure sweetness. Prabhupada could be quite he could get annoyed,
Sure.
he could get sharp, right? And maybe Shraddhananda would have been that way with us if we were his disciples. I don't know, but he just had this glow on him that was so, and he was not afraid to dance. He would dance, in the monastery living room one day after lunch. He just started to dance the way they talk about it in the gospel, the direct disciples dancing like that. And I am a better human being or a better soul for having witnessed it. I will tell you that. It was so glorious. So we get a chance sometimes to have these experiences. But anyway, like I said, those markers, even if they're markers from others, I think sometimes hearing about them can be helpful to us as we doubt, helpful to us as we try to discriminate, because there is, talk about gravitational pull, the Maya has got a serious gravitational pull. The sense objects and the life of the senses has a serious gravitational pull. And I am not free of it by any means. But these moments that we have, and these moments that others have, that we read about, that we've experienced, that we hear about, can be touchstones for us on the truth of this path of knowledge. So we've come to 12:03, so it is time to move on. But thank you so much, all of you, for being here and being here in Zoom. This was a privilege to get a chance to do this. This is not the sort of thing I do very often, so it was a real privilege. So all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, son, from the bottom of this heart. This was just exactly what I hoped would happen, and it did happen. Your willingness to be self-revelatory and vulnerable, and tell people about yourself and why it is that you have become what you have become, which is truly a remarkable human being. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. So just to remind you, we will have the chapel will be open every day, 8 to 8. You're free to use it however you see fit. There will be each Sunday now, we will be gathering in the chapel for these talks and whatever other functions we have on Sundays. The classes will continue on Zoom. The Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday classes will continue on Zoom. And all of you who were attended today by Zoom, thank you so very much for being with us. It adds so much. And there were a few people here in the chapel, and that was sweet as well. So I'll close with our closing prayers. And may you all be well and in bright spirits. Any final thought or concern or question from anyone before I close?
Brother, I have one question.
Yes, Sundar.
In gospel, we read many times, Sri Ramakrishna mentioning that don't reason too much. But we all know that he was an embodiment of Jnana Yoga also. So is there any particular thing or particular phrase or particular incident which you can mention by which Sri Ramakrishna?
The reason Sri Ramakrishna said, don't reason too much, is because he said that for most people, and by that he meant the vast majority of people, Jnana Yoga was not the path for this time and this era, this close of the Kali Yuga. The path of Bhakti Yoga was the one that he recommended. Now the Bhakta does not reason much, as Bimal pointed out earlier. The Bhakta does not reason much. They accept everything as the manifestation of the glory and the power and the love of God. And so what can you reason about that? And so Sri Ramakrishna said to M, particularly he addressed this to M. He also said it to some of his other direct disciples and to Dr. Sarkar at the end of his life. But the reason being is that he was saying, adopt the Bhakti's path. Practice Bhakta. Chant the name of the Lord. Sing the name of the Lord. Seek the kingdom of God, as Christ put it. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. All wisdom, all righteousness, all that was hidden will be revealed. And so he didn't say reason your way there. He said seek. And what did he mean by seek? Ask and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Don't try to think your way there. Now, is there anything wrong with thinking? Of course not. We depend on it entirely and utterly. But there is emphasis and there is de-emphasis. And to answer your question, Sri Ramakrishna said, for this time, this era, this close of the Kali Yuga and the opening of the Jnana Yuga, of the Kali Yuga, Satyu, the golden age. This is the right path for most, by far and away most. Of course, he also recommended Karma Yoga and Raja Yoga, but he left it to Swami Vivekananda to really explain what he meant by that. But you'll notice that the thickest book that of the books that are produced in Vivekananda's name is Jnana Yoga. The reason was he was trying to persuade the people of England and the United States, the Westerners, to get over their absolute marriage to duality. And so he taught Jnana Yoga, but Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, very powerful talks that he gave. If you want to understand what is meant by an avatar, an incarnation, such as Sri Ramakrishna or Christ, read Swami Vivekananda's Christ the Messenger. It's a very slender little book. It's a talk he gave in Pasadena in 1900, in January of 1900. And it explains why we should have this great devotion to the incarnation, and not a blind faith, but a seeking faith, that when you seek, ye shall find. When you ask, it shall be given to you. When you knock, it shall be opened up. If you ask your father for bread, will he give you a stone? If you ask for a fish, will he give you a serpent? As Sri Ramakrishna said, put your affairs, ask from a noble person, and you will be rewarded accordingly. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna said, don't reason too much. Does that get it, Sundar?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? This is good.
I need to go.
Brother Gaurav here again. I think the main impediment to trying to reason is the concept that the I factor tends to come in if you're trying to intellectualize something, and that is a drawback if you're pursuing spiritual growth, I guess.
Right. All right. I asked Bimal to get up and go because he needed to. So I'm going to, Aaron, could you hold this for me so that I don't have to do it? Thank you. So our beloved closing prayers. This is a translation by Swami Yogishananda of an ancient prayer for peace. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward knowing we are always in the loving and protective embrace of the divine being as our mother and father. So until next time, thank you everyone here in the chapel. Thank you everyone on Zoom. Hari Om Tat Sat. We'll see you again soon. You can turn it off.